Hey guys, Jason Timothy here, musicsoftwaretraining.com. Hope you guys are all hanging in there. In this video, we're going to do a part 2 to my absolute beginners walkthrough. So in part 1, and if you haven't watched part 1, you'll definitely want to watch that before watching this one, especially if you've never used Ableton or you've never finished a song before. That's what you're going to want to start with. And what we did in the first video is I just taught you the basic cut, copy, paste, duplicate, delete, and how to work with strictly audio in Ableton. So in this video, we're going to kick it up a notch here, and I'm just going to show you one basic Midi tool that you can use and get a good amount of flexibility out of. Once again, I'm trying to keep this incredibly simple. Also in the last video, we went into our basic effects of EQ, compression, delay, and reverb. So yeah, definitely watch part 1 if you are a beginner. And now let's get into part 2. And what we're going to do here is, so we've got this stab right here. Let me just go ahead and play kind of just our starter rhythm here. In this case, we were using like a minimal techno song as an example. Now, if we're working strictly with audio and we want to change, let's say, a note that's being played. So let's say we want, let's just come over here. And I just highlight here. Let's grab this note. And then Command E is going to slice it if you're using a PC. Once again, use Control instead of Command. And with that, we can now come over in here, just by double clicking the clip, we can change the pitch. So we could do something like, and then maybe we'll do the same thing with this one here. Right, so this way we could kind of change the notes. And when we're changing the notes, we could either use beats. In this case, with a sound like this, we might get better results using Complex or Complex Pro. So let's go ahead and we'll just use Complex Pro. It's just a better, more accurate algorithm. Actually, let's just highlight everything. So we just click the first one, hold down Shift and click the last one. And then we can just change this here to Complex Pro. And that way when we change the pitch, it's going to sound more accurate. Cool. So that's great if we're just working with audio, and you could absolutely do that and not have to worry about Midi if you don't want to, have to learn too much in the beginning and you want to kind of get your song started. So the second option is to use Midi to make it easier to change notes and things like that. So let me show you that now. So I'm just going to hit Command Shift T, and that'll create a Midi track. And once again, if you're using a PC, every time I say Command, just use Control. So now that we've got this Midi track here, we can just click here. I'm going to get rid of these defaults here because you won't see this. But what we can do here, we've got this kind of stab sound. So what's this called? DT3 Synth Loop. So let's take a look here. Okay, so we've got this part here. So what we can do is, instead of dragging it in as audio, we could drag it into a Midi track like this. And it'll automatically make a Midi tool. And this is the simpler instrument. So once we have that, we're not going to use this whole loop. We're just going to use one single hit. So as you see from the beginning, you could just simply set like an endpoint here. So we're just having that one note. And then you see the magnifying glass, you could come in closer just by dragging down and then drag the beginning point to the beginning. So if you want to play the sound at the key that the original sample is in, which in this case looks like a C, oops, that's a C there, you would play that on the C3 note. Now, if you don't have a keyboard or you don't know, how to use a controller or whatever, don't worry. You can just come up here and click this keyboard part. And now, when you arm this track, and arming a track just means clicking this deal right here on your track, and this will allow you to use your QWERTY keyboard, and when you hit the A key, it's going to play a C note, right? By default, it should be at C3, but if it's playing high like that or low like that, you just want to use the X or Z key to shift the octave until it sounds the way it's supposed to. So once we have that, we can now play across the keyboard and get different notes. Right? So what we'll do is we'll just, we're going to come back over here. I'm going to turn the stabs off so that it doesn't get in the way. And to make a MIDI clip, you just hit Command, Shift, and M after you highlight an area. So we just want a 2-bar. So we got this here, Command, Shift, M, Control if you're using a PC. And we've got this in here. So now we can enter in our notes, right? And depending on how long we make the note is how long it plays, right? So we can have a short one and then a long one. And it looks like we've got just a 1-bar here. So let's set the loop and we'll change the length here to 2 bars. And I'll just stretch this out. And I goofed here. We want to set this to 2 bars here, not 1 bar. So So just by playing on the C note, we're just getting the same note. But the advantage of MIDI is we can easily change the notes as well. So we've got this pattern here that we just created on the C note. And down here, this is our resolution. So we could set this to 1/16. And then once again, we can kind of move this however we want for rhythm. And if we want to hear what note we're playing, we just come over here and hit this speaker icon. Right, so we can control the length here. Now if we want the length to always be kind of the same, so that we don't have to stretch our notes out, that's really easy to do. We just come in here and on our controls, we should have the attack, decay, sustain, and release in this classic mode. And that's, I would stick with the classic mode. And then we could just bring the release up. So now it's playing the whole sample here all the way till the end. If we look, we could see. So the only time that it interrupts is when another note is hit. Now that we've got that, we can, we can actually make different notes here. And if we hold the shift key and the down arrow, we can go down an octave. So as you can see, it's pretty simple to create like a melodic part from a sample using the simpler instrument. Now, obviously, the simpler can do more things and get more complicated, but once again, I'm trying to teach you just the basics here so that you can get started right away and empower yourself in making music. And these basics here are basics that everyone uses. Even the professionals will use tools in this simple way. So once again, understanding these simple things will give you probably 60 to 70% of what you need to know in order to make songs. So I should probably also mention here that it's a good idea to turn the warp on. That'll keep the same length even when you change notes. If you listen, this is the normal length. If I go up an octave, that's going to make it play twice as fast. And if I do it again, you'll really notice how short the sample gets, right? And if we go down an octave, you'll hear that it goes half the time. And sometimes that's a cool effect. Sometimes you want things stretched out like that. But if you want to keep the integrity of the length, just turn warp on. And once again, for sounds like this, I would go with Complex Pro. If you're working with drums, you can just do beats and that'll be fine. And then if I change the notes, it'll be the same length. Obviously, if you go more than a couple octaves up, there's going to be some artifacts that you're going to get from that. And that could be something you want or something you don't want. But if you keep within like a 1 octave range, you should have the sound integrity remaining pretty well. That could be important when you're programming melodies and things like that out of one single note. So now that we've got this 2-bar part, we can stretch this out. And we could stretch this out here as well. And if we want to change something up, we can just highlight and cut here, and we can make like a little like maybe we want to double that note there. Just for a little variation, maybe the next one we can cut here and let's bring this up and bring this back. And just like with editing audio with the Midi, we can duplicate, copy, paste, delete, all that different stuff. So let's have this up here and this down here. So like so. So now we've got a part that's more interesting just by kind of cutting a loop and then adding little edits. So this would be the next step that I would suggest to you guys. You could also do this with your drums, and you just, as long as you stay on the C3 note, you can program your drums in. So let's say we've got hi-hats here, but let's make another hi-hat. So just Command-Shift-T will make a MIDI part, right? And let's find, all right, so great. So let's say we want to use that. Once again, we just double click on our MIDI part. Get rid of these. Those are my defaults, so you're usually not going to see that. Drag this down. And then we just find the sample that we want, right? Something like that. And then once again, we can make a 2-bar loop. Just highlight, Command-Shift-M. And now we can pretty much just put everything on C3, right? So if I come over here to 16th notes, and there's some reasons where you might want to use 32nd notes or whatever, but we're trying to keep things simple. 16 notes is pretty standard to use. So let's just, and you can just put one in and then just kind of move it to see what you like. Let me unsolo this. That's kind of cool. So just as simple as that, we can make our patterns here. And if we turn our loop on once again, we could just stretch that out. And we've got another part. Maybe try moving that over there and see what that sounds like. And then it's just a matter of, you know, mixing the volume where we want it. And just like with the other parts, we could go ahead and, I'm just going to copy this here and paste it into our hi-hat track. So we've got all of our parts. We can come in and we can EQ. So it looks like we don't have that low frequency stuff, which is good. Sometimes even high samples like this can have little mud in there, so we usually will get rid of those low frequencies. And then with the compressor, that's a little too strong for me, but I could just play with the percentage and then of course we turn it off and on just to hear the difference. All right, and we could try reverb if we want. Usually it would be like a shorter reverb. Turn the wet dry up to a more extreme level so we can hear what the reverb's doing. A little bit less. And then I'll just back the wet dry up. Right there, real subtle. Delay is always fun to check out, but I think that we're probably fine without it. That's a little too complicated. We could try maybe an 8th note. Let's back off the feedback. And maybe back this. Let's see if that makes sense. Just those little whisper or ghosty delays, I kind of like those sometimes. And then we can kind of EQ the delay a little bit lower than the original sound. So it sounds a little bit more like just a shadow. And then after processing, it still sounds a little bit loud. So I'll bring this down here in volume. Now, some of you may be asking, okay, now I know how to draw in my notes, but what if I wanted to record and play those notes myself? That's not too difficult to do. Actually, it's really easy. So we'll just move this to the side for right now. The only thing you got to worry about is possible latency, which means when you hit a note, sometimes you're not going to hear it for a moment, and that can create weird delays and make it a little more difficult. So in a lot of cases, it's easier to draw in your notes, but let's go ahead and record some hi-hats. So we'll just turn this on to arm it. We've got our part here, and let's go ahead and turn it up so I can hear what's being played more. All right. And then let's get a count in of 1 bar. And then all we have to do is come up here, hit record. So all I did was just hitting the A key with this keyboard icon turned on, and it played the C3 note, which is the correct note, to create a part. And as you can see, there seems to be some latency, and also I wasn't playing super accurate, but I think there's a little bit of latency. So what you would want to do is make sure to highlight all of these, and then you could right click and go to quantize settings. And I would set it to the closest 16th note. We could set it to 100%. If you want just a little bit of, humanization, go, 85% or 90%. Let's go 90%. And that'll correct the timing to the closest 16th note. We'll turn off the metronome here. Like so. And that would be how you would record in your part. And you could do the same thing, obviously, with a more melodic part as well. You just play across the QWERTY keyboard. And I'll just drop an image of which notes work on the QWERTY keyboard. So there you guys have it. That is the start of using MIDI in your tracks with just one simple instrument, just the simpler instrument. And as you notice, you don't need to drag in the instrument. You could just drag the audio into the track where you would normally put your effects and things like that. And it'll create a simpler instrument for you. And then you just set that start and end point. And then you could adjust, the attack, decay, sustain, and release of the sound. So once again, I want to keep this very simple, very doable, but this is something extra that you could do with some of these sounds that we downloaded in the first video. But this is more flexibility that we have with the samples that we downloaded in part 1 of this series. So once again, if you've never produced a song before, hopefully this will empower you and show you how to get things rolling much more easily. So hopefully this helps you guys, and I'll speak to you guys real soon. Take care.